The Statue of Liberty is eating itself alive from the inside. What looks like America's eternal symbol of freedom is actually a massive battery that's slowly destroying her steel skeleton through galvanic corrosion. Engineers have already performed emergency surgery once to save her life. But with rising seas and Hurricane Sandy showing us what's coming, the question is no longer if Lady Liberty will face her final battle, it's when. Today, we're going inside America's most beloved monument to see how much time she actually has left. In 1886, French sculptor Frédéric-Auguste Bartholdi and engineer Gustave Eiffel created what would become both an architectural masterpiece and a ticking time bomb. They built the Statue of Liberty using two different metals, a thin copper skin wrapped around an iron skeleton. Eiffel knew this was dangerous. When copper and iron meet in the presence of moisture, they create galvanic corrosion, essentially turning the entire statue into a giant battery that eats itself from the inside out. To prevent disaster, American engineers separated the two metals with an insulating layer of asbestos cloth soaked in shellac. For decades, this ingenious solution worked perfectly. The 151-foot statue stood majestically in New York Harbor, welcoming millions of immigrants. But the engineers didn't account for time. By the 1970s, nearly a century after construction, something deadly was happening inside Lady Liberty. The asbestos insulation had dried out and become porous. The shellac had cracked and separated. Now, instead of protecting the metals from each other, this deteriorated barrier was actually trapping moisture and salt from New York Harbor's brutal marine environment. The statue had become a massive galvanic cell, with electric current flowing between the copper skin and iron skeleton, causing accelerated corrosion unlike anything engineers had ever seen. The iron framework began to swell and distort as rust consumed it from within. This expansion put tremendous stress on the copper saddles, the small brackets that connect the skin to the skeleton. In section after section, the saddles began failing. Rivets were literally being pulled through the copper skin as the corroded iron pushed outward. By 1981, engineers discovered that 600 saddles throughout the statue were affected. David Moffett, the Park Service superintendent, put it simply, "I don't know how much time we have before the damage is irreparable." Workers who climbed inside the statue during routine inspections were finding sections where the iron had deteriorated so badly that structural failure seemed imminent. In 1982, America faced a terrifying reality. The Statue of Liberty might not survive to see her 100th birthday. The decision was made to perform the most complex restoration in the statue's history. Virtually the entire internal skeleton had to be replaced while keeping the delicate copper skin intact. Workers had to operate inside the cramped, toxic environment of the statue's interior, dealing with over a century of accumulated lead paint and asbestos. The solution came from space-age technology. NASA's zinc silicate coating, K-Zinc 531, provided superior corrosion resistance for marine conditions. But the real breakthrough was material science. After extensive testing, engineers selected 316L stainless steel to replace the original iron. This chromium-nickel molybdenum alloy had the perfect combination of strength, flexibility, and corrosion resistance. The replacement process was surgical in its precision. Workers removed nearly every armature bar while preserving the copper skin's exact contours. Each new stainless steel bar was coated with Teflon to eliminate friction. The installation was so successful that 10 years later, inspection teams confirmed that all corrosion problems had been eliminated. By 2012, the Statue of Liberty seemed invincible. The internal restoration had succeeded beyond all expectations. Then Hurricane Sandy arrived and revealed a completely different kind of vulnerability. On October 29, 2012, a storm surge unprecedented in New York Harbor's recorded history slammed into Liberty Island. 75% of the island's 12 acres disappeared underwater. The flooding destroyed electrical systems, demolished brick walkways, obliterated the dock, and completely flooded the small residence where Park Superintendent David Luxinger lived with his wife. "We lost pretty much everything that was in the house," Luxinger said. "We won't be living here anymore, and probably nobody will be living here anymore. So at least I'll be able to say I was the last one to stay here." Sandy ended a 200-year tradition of people living on Liberty Island. But more importantly, it revealed that the statue faced a new kind of vulnerability: extreme weather events that were becoming more frequent and more severe. The storm caused $77 million in damage and forced the monument to close for over 8 months. Sandy wasn't a freak occurrence. It was a preview of the new reality for coastal infrastructure in the 21st century. Here's the engineering reality. The Statue of Liberty stands only 24 feet above current sea level, and the water isn't stopping. Sea levels in New York Harbor have risen more than 1.5 feet since the 1850s. This rise has accelerated in recent decades due to thermal expansion of warming oceans and ice melt from polar regions. UNESCO now classifies the Statue of Liberty as having high exposure risk from sea level rise. The National Park Service responded to Sandy by elevating critical electrical systems 20 feet above sea level. But these defensive measures only buy time. Storm surge models project that Sandy-level flooding could happen as frequently as every 23 years by the end of this century. We recognize that these environmental stresses are real, and they are going to become more common and intense, says Sean Norton of the NPS operations team. Right now, the Statue of Liberty is undergoing another massive preservation effort that will determine her survival for the next century. The National Park Service has launched a $22 million infrastructure project funded by the Great American Outdoors Act. Workers are waterproofing the exterior levels of Fort Wood that serves as the statue's foundation. 50,000 square feet of walking surfaces are being upgraded to improve drainage and prevent the catastrophic flooding that Sandy demonstrated. This project represents something new in the statue's history: proactive preparation for environmental threats rather than reactive repairs after damage occurs. From an engineering standpoint, the internal structure could last indefinitely. The 1980s restorations solved the galvanic corrosion problem so completely that the statue's skeleton should remain stable for centuries with proper maintenance. But survival depends on factors beyond engineering. The statue faces approximately $15 million annually in routine maintenance costs. Major infrastructure projects require tens of millions more every decade. Future storm protection measures could require hundreds of millions in additional investment. The real question becomes financial and political. How much will society spend to preserve an icon? The Statue of Liberty's greatest vulnerability may be financial sustainability in an era of accelerating infrastructure demands. Each major storm requires millions in recovery costs. Rising seas demand ever more expensive flood protection systems. The monument generates significant tourism revenue, over $100 million annually in local impact, but disaster recovery costs are growing faster than revenue. Other coastal landmarks offer sobering precedents. Historic lighthouses have been moved inland at costs exceeding their original construction. Venice has spent billions on flood barriers that may prove insufficient within decades. The Statue of Liberty faces a paradox. She's both more secure and more vulnerable than ever before. Her internal structure has been restored to last centuries. Her symbolic power remains undiminished as millions visit annually. The financial argument for preservation is strong, with tourism generating over $1 billion in regional activity. But she stands in the path of rising seas that won't stop rising. She needs society to commit resources not just for preservation, but for continuous defense against an increasingly hostile environment. How long can the Statue of Liberty actually survive? With unlimited resources and perfect maintenance, she could stand for centuries. The restoration technologies and engineering solutions exist and work. The real question is whether we'll choose to pay the increasing price of keeping her alive. Because unlike the original construction, Preservation in the age of rising seas requires permanent, ever-growing investment. Every storm, every flood, every rise in sea level adds to the cost of keeping America's most famous symbol above water. The Statue of Liberty won't fall tomorrow, but she's fighting battles that didn't exist when she was built. Whether she's still welcoming visitors in 2075 won't depend on engineering alone. It will depend on whether we're willing to pay whatever it takes to preserve the things that define us. If you've stayed with me this far, you understand that our greatest monuments face challenges their builders never imagined. This channel explores the hidden battles that iconic structures fight every day. Hit subscribe and check out the next video waiting for you. Because the truth about preservation is always more complicated and more expensive than anyone wants to admit.